Ooh, I think we must have turned that mic up a little bit at some point. I'll turn that back down. Welcome back to Forum after a couple of weeks off. We are so delighted to have Kate Piderman here this morning. She was here. Where did she go? Maybe I'll have to... she told me to give her a humble introduction. It may have to be quite elaborate and quite not so humble since she has left the room. Kate is a chaplain at Mayo Clinic and has been for a number of years. Currently she serves in the area of hospice. She has worked in mental health and addiction. She has worked in transplant and is just an incredible resource to Mayo Clinic and to the patients that she serves there as a chaplain and providing spiritual care. She also is a psychologist and has a Ph.D. in psychology, and so she heads the research area of chaplain services at Mayo and is here somewhere. There she is. Oh, I do have to be humble. And so she is here to talk about one of the recent projects that she's been working with terminally ill patients, and I'm very excited about this as we think about our lives and all facets of it. I think one of the most attended to areas of our life is end of life, and all the various components that go into that. And so her research is on the spiritual legacy and what we think of God and how God has walked with us in our lives, and to share that with those that we love. So important. And so I'm excited that you're here, and thank you for being here today.
Well, I can tell already that Lutherans are different than Catholics because there's people in the front row. That's amazing. So there's a few empty seats up here. What a privilege to be with you. Thank you for your welcome, Pastor Jason, and your congregation. I was able to worship with you this morning. Beautiful, beautiful service. This project is dear to my heart, and as I listened to the readings this morning and the prayers, I thought, what a perfect Sunday for me to come. We didn't plan it this way, but those people on the road to Emmaus, they had a story, didn't they? And Jesus took time to listen. Jesus had his own story, and they took time to listen to him. And the privilege of this work is that I get to listen to people, and in them I do find Jesus. I am meeting saint after saint after saint. So far we have enrolled in the research project 62 people. Many of them don't complete the study. I'm a much better chaplain than I am a researcher. We enroll people if we think they might complete, but it doesn't always work that way. But I'm going to tell you some about the project itself, the research, and then I want to introduce you to a few of the people that I've met along the way. I think there's a clicker, but I don't know, it's too much stuff. Okay. Which button? Oh, side, okay. What you see there is the product that we produce for people. We produce a document that they can then share with family, with physicians, other people caring for them, friends. We had a person who said to us, I only want one. Nobody cares about me. And I went back to see him because we can produce up to 25 free, and we've had requests for more than that, and we just managed to do it. And I said, oh, wouldn't you like two? I mean, one for the other person who's involved in this? He said, okay, two, but that's all, just two. So after he had the two, he came to our office and said, could I have 5 more? pretty soon we'd exhausted the 25 and had to make an order for more. So these are lovely, lovely keepsakes. We've been blessed with grants, small grants within Mayo, but also a benefactor who has given us very generously $100,000, just said, use it, do good, and certainly we're trying to do that. I think I'll just do this. So what we do, this is an IRB, Institutional Review Board approved study. It is research. We enroll a person, a patient who has an advanced disease of any kind. Our first group was a cohort of people with neurologic illnesses. Most of them had brain tumors, some had MS, Parkinson's, ALS, anything that assaults the brain. They complete questionnaires at admission and also at 2 follow-up time points. The intervention is an interview with a chaplain, and I've been a chaplain since 1993, did parish work before that. This has really deepened my ability to be with people. We have a set of questions that we go through, people engage, we learn so very much about them. It's a beautiful, beautiful process. The interview is recorded and then transcribed, and then from that we prepare this document. But people always want to know, what is the interview like? And we ask, there's a set of questions. They are published and therefore copyrighted not by Mayo but by the journal. If you want the article, I can certainly send it to you, and I'll go back to what my email is later. But we ask about spiritual background. So who is the first person who taught you about your faith? And if people are not religious, and some are not, we ask about values or spirituality, whatever word they're comfortable with. So if I were to ask you that question, who is the first person that taught you about your faith? Anyone?
Mother.
Parents? Grandparents? Okay. So we hear those kinds of answers. We hear neighbor. We hear pastor. Various things, but we also invite the people to describe that relationship. And we have some beautiful, I don't know what we'll do with all that we have. There's probably not enough time in my life to do what I'd like to do. But some beautiful stories. I sat on the neighbor's porch, and Mrs. Smith told me about God. Oh, beautiful. My father took me to church, and afterwards we had pancakes. And I really like the pancakes better than church. Okay. We asked them, what do you consider the best thing you've ever done? And I bet you can imagine, working with many Minnesota people, nothing. I've never done anything good. So we probed that a bit. Well, is there anything you're proud of? Is there anything you'd like your grandchildren to know? And then do we ever get beautiful stories? Sometimes we get stories people don't know. So I saved so-and-so from drowning. And maybe the rest of the family doesn't know. Very often, what people are most proud of is the way they've raised their family, their relationships. And it is so beautiful. There's a book that talks about building, Ruth, I bet you can, so not building a resume, but...
This David Brooks book, The Road to Character, it talks about the difference between creating a resume life, which is what I've done, and and a eulogy life, which was at the end people say, you were a good person, and help, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's what these people are unfolding for us. We also ask about struggle, and Pastor Lisa certainly talked about struggle in her sermon this morning. Everybody's had struggle. There are other people who do this kind of legacy work, and one very renowned person said to me, "I don't think you should ask about struggle at the end of life." And I was shocked, because as a chaplain, that's what we hear. That's usually why people want to see us. We've continued to ask, and it's continued to be a very, very fruitful question. People have stuff inside. Some of it goes in the book, some of it doesn't. But all of it is carefully listened to and tended by the chaplain who's interviewing them. So it's a beautiful question. We'll continue. And then we ask about spiritual guidance or wisdom that people would like to pass on or reinforce one more time. And my goodness, do we have wisdom. I've studied theology formally on 2 occasions, and there's lots of good information in books. These are living books. They are living messengers of God. So after the interview, we draft the spiritual legacy for them. And we go back and forth until we have a document that they're happy with. I think the longest that this took was one patient. It took 9 months. And I couldn't quite figure it out. Why is it taking so long? He kept changing. And finally, the last time, he said, "Will I ever get to see you again?" And it wasn't about me. I mean, I was certainly the agent of that, but I think he was worried that he would not continue to have a relationship with someone who would listen and care. I said, "You will absolutely see me again." He has since died. So we, again, free of charge, we have 25 or more, and then there's other questionnaires that come. When we looked at, am I in the way here? I don't know. When we looked at the data from the first group, now these, again, brain tumors and other neurologic diseases, we had 44% with an aggressive brain tumor. And as you can see, 41% died during the study. So we did not have a good completion record. It matters to me in the long run as someone who wants to continue to do this research, but the smiles, the gratitude was much more important than any number we produced. We had a good range of gender and age. This always strikes people. 21, and he died on the study. So grateful to be able to participate. We have had a younger subject. Our youngest has been 19. And we have a good range of people. Again, this is a small group. At this point, we also have some ethnic diversity. We have 2 people from the Middle East. We have someone from Ireland. We have someone from the Philippines. It's really been beautiful. And we have one bona fide atheist in the group. That's what he told me. He said, "I'm a bona fide atheist. Can I still do this?" I said, "Absolutely. We'll do our best for you." So, have questions? Yes?
So is this something you're hoping to expand then to the general public over time?
I will talk about that, but the answer is yes. And I don't know how. Some of it is beyond my control. And pardon? Or repeat the question. Is it something that I'm hoping to expand to the greater public, general public? I mean, I would say yes, but also I think individual churches, individual people might be able to modify it for use with people they love. So I think, yeah, I think it'd be good, and hopefully you'll get some ideas as I continue. Yes.
You mentioned one bona fide atheist. Could you comment on your personal experience working with that person versus those others that have a strong religious belief?
Yeah, it's hard for me in that I am a devout Christian, but he had values that certainly were the values that I carried. And what was intriguing to me, the more we worked with him, the more he opened up. And at the very, very end, he said, if there is an afterlife. So, no, 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 for a long time. And then, if there is an afterlife, I will send signs to my family that I am working. Isn't that interesting? So I don't know if there's any atheists in foxholes or at the end of life. I haven't found too many. So different, but okay. Okay, shall I go on? 'Cause I think you'll like the next part best. Not this part. This is for those of you who like science and numbers. What we found, so 15 people, I will not be rich or famous because of 15 people. Won't be rich or famous anyway, but what we found was with this group who did complete the first follow-up, remember a lot died, it isn't that they didn't want to, increased peacefulness, increased emotional well-being, increased spiritual well-being, and this is important to me, increased sense of connection and support from spiritual resources such as church communities. Some of them, after the interview, said, I am going to start going back to church. I am going to call my pastor. So that was beautiful, and increased hopefulness. So those make me happy as a scientist, as a researcher. So, who are these people? Well, again, we have 62 enrolled, but I picked a couple of them, and this is not her real name. She was Lutheran, married with 2 children. She was a manager in not a nursing home, but one of those extended care facilities. She was 45, and she had an advanced brain tumor. It was not her first experience of cancer. She had had breast cancer 6 years earlier. That had helped her to get, as she said, back on track. This was a primary brain tumor. It had nothing to do with the breast cancer, and she was devastated. She thought the breast cancer might get her, but she was not expecting this. So as we look at our transcripts, we look at how are these people formed in their faith. And I thought you would learn best from their voices. My mom prayed with us every night before we went to bed. How many of you have done that with children? I hope parents are still doing that with children. That's what I hope. It's so important. And my 2 sisters and my brother also went to the same church and were confirmed. So all I know is Lutheran. And that's a theme that runs through it. You know, that early formation is so important. Of course, you know, as you get older, you kind of sometimes tend to step away and find other interests. But I always try to find churches to go back to and keep attending. And when I had my kids, I did the same thing. And at this point, she is not only a mother, but a grandmother, and her wish was that one grandchild who was not baptized would be baptized in the Lutheran church where she had been baptized. I'm not sure if that happened. This is what she says about godparents. My godparents are Lutheran, big believers, very wonderful people, good church-going people. They influence me a lot. So I bet most of us in this room are godparents. Important role. They gave me a great Bible that I still have this day for my confirmation, and I very much cherish it, even though I don't read out of it. It's like, you know, some people do. But honestly, by the end of the interview, she said, I'm going to start reading. And I'm not saying that's magic, but I'm saying as people review what's important to them, they want to reclaim it. Reimagine was the word that was used upstairs. And it's a privilege to do that. So again, she's grateful to these people. And I want you to see this because no doubt there are people in your lives that are grateful to you. And what you do is important, it's precious. This is what she says about dying. When you know you're dying, you realize how much you really need God in your life. I'm sure a lot of people have wondered, is there really a higher power? Is there really something out there? I have had those thoughts too, but I have always believed that there has to be. I guess I just hang on when I can, and when I feel I'm slipping, you know, when I kind of lose track of him for a while. But I always seem to come back. I always seem to find my faith and my way back. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's why we need to visit the sick and send cards and call and text and do all that, because people do, they slip, they wonder, they worry. And it's not just me, it's not just your pastors, it's all of us as Christian people that have that responsibility. I guess I have to come up here. And here's her statement of struggle. It's like at first when I found out that I didn't have years anymore, that we were just looking into less than a year. Now remember, she's 45. I have just been begging and pleading. Give me as much time as you can kind of thing. And then another part of me, well, you're not so deserving. There are other people that go out there and go to church, etc., etc. I feel like I don't deserve the love and the time I'm asking for. So, Chaplain, who also does research, and it wasn't me, said, what about grace? What about grace? Can we do that in this kind of research? Yes, absolutely. And that led in another direction. But what I want you to see here is the struggle. Sometimes that is expressed, sometimes it isn't. We're privileged, I'm privileged in my role to hear a lot of it. But it's going on inside the people who are ill. Just going to do a couple more with her and see if you have comments. This is the way she works through this. But I've asked forgiveness for the things I've done in the past, and I've told myself that all I can do, that I've done all I can do, and he is going to take me in his hands. So I'm putting my faith in him as best I can, as best I know how. Just getting back on track is what's important, and I'm trying to keep it real. Can you imagine her family having those words? And her children and her grandchildren, and what a beautiful message that will be for them. Profound.
Is there an extra microphone?
She talks about relationships, and she talks about the many, many people in her life and trying to balance her energy. She's getting sicker, she's getting tired. All these people want to come and see her. What does she do? And she says, she speaks of the tired, but then she says, but I want everybody to be able to tell me what they need. Sometimes it makes me cry, but I'm glad that they had this part of their closure. So people who are sick continue to want to give. You know, they're not done giving just because they're sick or they're dying. And this is a way that they can summarize their life and continue to give back. Many of you are familiar with Erik Erikson. He speaks about generativity. It's important to continue to be generative or produce even all through your life. And then she speaks about grief. I don't want anyone to grieve very long. Grieve, go on, have a good time. You know, isn't that beautiful? And again, the family has this message. I want them to continue to make happy memories. And this is her wisdom. Life is too short, life is too precious. Really pay attention to what you are doing. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and have a good time, enjoy life, make happy, fun memories. Don't take it for granted. Don't live stupidly. It should be on a billboard, shouldn't it, somewhere? What do you think about this woman? She has died. One other story, I talked to her at some point shortly after this, and she said, it was right before Halloween, and she was making costumes for her grandchildren, and someone had come to her all worried because the costume wasn't going to be right and wasn't going to be done, not her costume, but the one she was making. And she said basically this: life is too short to be that worried about a costume. You know, it's interesting, your priorities change at the end of life. What do you think about this woman?
We like her.
You like her? I like her too. Is she wise? Anything surprise you in her comments?
She seems at peace. She seems very peaceful.
Struggle, there was, this was one of some are more, I guess the word would be linear. They have more peace than she had. She did struggle. Am I worthy? She went back and forth about that. And it was hard to read. I did not interview it, but I prepared the document. It's hard to read that struggle, but I think this helped her, as you can see by that statement. Yes?
I think she just speaks to that idea that we so often don't appreciate something until we lose it. And that she can see it ahead, that she won't get to appreciate a longer life that she thought she might have. And so to kind of warn people that be mindful as much as they can in their daily walk, that they have a chance to notice the preciousness of what we have.
And I'm thinking people can't hear the back, is that right?
Is there another
I guess
thing up there?
oh, maybe.
They are back here. Yeah?
Can you say that? Yeah, do you remember me? Dr. Morris taught me everything I knew in addictions, and then Dr. Schneeklopp. So I think basically the comment was, if I'm summarizing it right, why wait till the end to have this kind of wisdom? Thank you.
I was just saying that it's that basic idea that we might not appreciate something till we lose it. So she knows she's going to have a shortened life, and she's really focused on that she won't get to enjoy it as much. And so if she sees people just going mindlessly through their day, not appreciating how precious life is, just a warning to be more mindful of you know, what you can enjoy every day, as long as you have it.
Thank you. And interviewing these people, and having had, brushes with death along the way, I thought, I'm not waiting. I'm not waiting. Today is today. I'm going to do my best today. I'm going to do what I can to have fun and produce, love the Lord, share the Lord. That's why I'm here on a Sunday. So, any other comments about? Okay, I'll go on with another person and just explain. It will answer a bit of your question about, what is my hope for this? This is what the books look like, and if you're thinking, boy, I want to be in this study, I do have brochures. You can take one, decide. You can give it to somebody else if you want. So the books look like this. The person that prepared it with me was not eligible for the study at that time. He had a metastatic lung cancer, but at that point we were just enrolling people with neurologic illnesses, and he did not have that. But he sat in my office maybe 3 or 4 times and told me his spiritual journey based on those questions. I typed while he talked. So is there any reason you can't do that for someone else? There is absolutely no reason. I bring the wisdom that I have from chaplaincy, but you all have your own wisdom. So his name is John. It's hard for me because he was a good friend of mine. He fixed many things in my house. His wife said to me, I think he has more fun fixing things at your house than at our house. I don't know what all that means, but anyway, she let him come. This is what he says about his beliefs today. He is now deceased. I believe that it's really my faith and my spirit that matter. This is his opinion, not whether I go to church or not. I believe in God, and I think that the relationship I have with the Lord is very important, just like it is with people. Science makes me doubt some things, but I still think there is good and evil, and I think everyone has a soul. I believe in the power of prayer, and I pray every night for my friends, both living and dead. And I believe that prayer actually works. Doesn't he sound? So here's maybe a bona fide agnostic, but I don't know agnostics. I'm never quite sure what that means. This is what he says about his cancer diagnosis, and I think it was very striking, his words, his language. That fall day in 2012, when I was diagnosed with cancer, was the worst day of my life. I remember feeling scared and kind of numb and not knowing how to act. So at this point, and there's nothing you or I can do about this, we do not have chaplains in these outpatient areas. And I don't know why not, because it's such a horrible, confronting time for people. It was hard to realize, and it was hard to accept that they were talking about me. I don't know if you've ever been in a doctor's office and you see these scans and all this fancy stuff and you think it must be somebody else. I felt so hopeless. I thought I'd be dead by the end of the year. I was terrified. I wanted to hurry to get things done. I'm grateful to so many people who got me through that time. It meant so much to me that they prayed for me and talked about it with me. So again, are you hearing the value of your prayer? Telling people about that. And also talking with people. What's it like? What's it like to have cancer? What's it like for you now? He says, life is like a roller coaster. I'm glad for the ups, but I have to live with the dread of more things to come. Then he says, respites from the clinic are wonderful. Yeah. he says this about himself and relationships. What I want people to remember most about me is that the most important thing in life is being a friend. It's the best way to live. You have to be there, show interest in your friends, love them, respect them. I've tried to do that for others, and my friends have done that for me. I appreciate all the opportunities I have had to be a friend, and I sure appreciate all those who have been a friend to me. And then this line is beautiful. It's right out of his mouth. I believe it is now time to complete the journey that we will all travel. I mean, he's speaking about our journey. His journey is different than some of us will make. I was able to be with him as he was dying, and there were books, his books, around the room. And it was beautiful for me to see people pick them up and say, I didn't know that about John. I didn't know that about John. And I am so grateful to have had this opportunity to do this kind of work. There's another person I have up here, but one group that we are getting closer to in this current phase of research are the elderly. We have a participant that is 93, one who is 91, and I think she's the only, well, I told myself this morning, do not say anything political, but I'm just going to say this one thing. She is going to run for president, and she should, as long as I will be her vice. So, I don't know if Canadian-born can be vice president. I said, Alice, if you will be the president, I will. Anyway, and I just interviewed a man who is 90. So sadly, he died yesterday. I interviewed him on Friday. And I was not expecting that he would die so soon. It was a beautiful interview. These older people are, what would I say, their path, at least the way they express it, is straighter than some of the younger people. The younger folks seem to have ups and downs with spiritual relationships, relationship with God. I don't know if it's because we've gotten so busy. I don't know if it's because people don't go into church as often. I do not know. But the 91-year-old who should be president says, it is the way it is. It was the way it was. I mean, you just didn't argue. You didn't question. You just went. But the 91-year-old, everything seems straight and good and based, he was a Missouri Synod Lutheran man, based on his faith. And then I asked the struggle question, and he spoke about the war. And he spoke about some of the challenging things in the war. And I was so glad that I asked that question. And at the end, I thanked him for the time, because it truly, truly is a privilege. Well, of course, he thanked me for coming. So his family will have that book. He will not complete the study, but we'll have the book. All right, I'm going to stop. Questions? Yes? Oh, thank you, Dr. Morse.
I have two comments. Excuse me. I have two comments to make. One is, it's important how you've learned how to ask the questions, and just wording a question can completely change the response. Instead of how are you today, or how are you feeling today, because you're going to get a one-word response. But if you ask what are you feeling today, it makes a big difference, and it calls for communication. And then secondly, my husband was asked a question once during his time, and it was, are you lonely? And that was quite profound to him, because he was terribly lonely. Even with us by his side, he was terribly lonely, because no one could hold his hand through this. No one was going where he was going.
It's a beautiful question to ask.
Paul.
My name is Gordon Christensen. I have a story that proves your point. My wife, well, first I'm 89, about 90 years old now. I don't have any health problems really. I'm slow to walk around, but I don't. My kids say, "Dad, why don't you write a story like your mother, like your wife did?" I said, "Well, I'm not really ready for it yet," I said. I'll tell you what, my wife was ready because she had osteoporosis, she had gluten-free diet problems. So what happened? My oldest granddaughter gave her a book about 5 years ago called The Book of Myself. About 200 questions in there, 200 pages of questions. I never saw her work on it. I put it for 5 years there, and she was suffering, you know. And the day she died at hospice, I came home and I found this book underneath her chair. And she'd answered about 147 pages of questions about her life. And it's things that we have never heard or seen before. Oh, pardon me. We're very thankful. I can't all say we've learned a lot about your wife. And what life she's been. She's really the leader of the family. She's the person we all go to for help. And as a result, what I did, I took and found pictures of her life and put in the pages where she didn't get it filled in. It's become a very important book for our family. I bought about 22 copies of it for $3,000, but it's the thing we really love now. And I have it by my bed every night and take a look at it. And it's important to tell your story. And my kids say, "Dad, tell your story." It's not my story, it's part of her story. We've been together 63 and a half years. It's been a great life.
You may have a few things that you'd want to put down, though, that would be valuable to your kids. So we are certainly not the only people doing these kinds of things, and I would encourage you, if this appeals to you at all, to do on your own. Go to Google or wherever and just look up legacy. The twist we have in this is that we are emphasizing the spiritual. And it doesn't mean that you can't do that with the other things, but that's the emphasis here. Did you have a question?
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I teach college students, 18-year-olds and up into their 20s. I usually begin by telling them they're going to die. And then we'll take it from there. Actually, that's news to some of them. But I have started emphasizing the importance of learning to tell their story. And I say, no one's going to tell your story for you. And I have them write a paper, and then I hand it back. I said, this isn't a story. And I want them to look at particular events. And so teaching people to tell their own stories. I'm so moved by the narrative, by the story you told, Gordon. But people need to be taught. And I think it's a good way to kind of if you learn early on, you can begin, it gives a way of reflecting. So I think what you're telling here is just wonderful. And I thank you. So all I had was a comment and an addition.
That's good. It's a wonderful thing to tell college kids, I think. We might not make so many mistakes if we thought that way, because we're also learning about what we want in that story, aren't we? You know.
Kate? Kate and I were friends years ago. You remember me too, Kate?
I do.
Kate was a hard-working chaplain and trying to become a psychologist at that time, and I'm happy to see you've been able to do both. One of the kind of simple-minded things I get out of your story is, or your presentation, is anybody can ask the right questions to people at this time, and allow them, and listen, and allow the outpouring of some of the spiritual, psychological issues that you're talking about. Not to negate what you're doing, but I think it's a good lesson for all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. And you're the guy whose picture's on the wall, isn't it, in some building? Oh,
Where have you been lately?
I don't know. I haven't been in there. Thank you. What a experience to work with you. Yes, it's something we can all do. I mean, your pastors preach, but don't we all live the message of the Lord? Don't we all share that by our lives? And listening is part of that. Listening is part of that. One other story, so where does this kind of thing come from in a busy life with lots of opportunity? It was a gentleman I met when I worked for a hospice in Iowa, northeastern Iowa, and I made the appointment to go with his wife. That was probably not too wise. She said, yes, he would like to see you, or yes, he needs to see you, or something like that. So I drove the hour out there. The wife was gone, and the man said to me, you can come in if you don't talk about death and you don't talk about God. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a hospice chaplain, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're on this beautiful farm. So I said, would you show me your farm? So he showed me his fields, he showed me his livestock, he showed me his coon dogs and his mule. And then he had bird feeders, and he said, let's watch the birds. This was a gentleman who surpassed the hospice guidelines and lived 9 months. And I went almost every week, and we watched the birds, whether inside or outside. And in the watching, he told stories. And when the time came for him to die, there were some signs that things were changing. One was that he had given away his coon dogs. He had sold his mule. And he said to me, he hadn't wanted prayer, still no talk about God. He said, that chaplain in the hospital, she prayed with us. I said, do you want me to pray with you? Yes, so we prayed. Then he said, that chaplain in the hospital, she held our hands. So people teach us what they want, don't they? And the next time I prayed, of course, I held hands with them. But what he said to me when he was very close, I said, how do I be a chaplain to people? And he said, remember to watch the birds. I have never, ever forgotten that. And he was speaking metaphorically. Sit down, take time, be with me. Just like the Lord did in that beautiful gospel story. The Lord took time to be with those, bewildered, frightened men on this journey. He took time, and they took time with him. And that's what this is about. It is something I'm privileged to do as a chaplain at Mayo, as someone who does research, but it's something we can all do.
I was just going to make a comment if I could.
Yes.
Lost it, I think. There's not always time for this to happen.
That's true.
And when you're confronted with that, then I think it's about the survivor doing the journaling or telling the story, or even sitting down and writing what they knew about the person who's gone, for people who may be even a little farther away in the family, or your own children too, because it's amazing to me how many things I know about my husband that my children didn't know. And so I think that there is maybe an opportunity there, and I think the survivor also needs to journal their journey, because you have to get past it. Or one of my friends met with me for coffee after my husband died, and I said, oh, but I've told you all this. And she said, tell me again, because you need to make as many, to survive it, you have to have those layers between you and the reality of it. And this kind of thing, whether it's journaling, whether it's expressing it in some other way or some other writing, is surprisingly helpful. I mean, I think you'd think people would know that, but I think you have to say that to them. You have to tell them. And I was with a widows group, and they were all journaling, and I was like, I don't journal, you know. But I think it's extremely important. And so having a book or having something that's pre-made is going to help some people who otherwise would find this a real challenge if you gave them just a blank page. So I applaud you in what you're doing, but don't forget the survivors.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And we do have some survivors that are doing this kind of thing with us. We're looking at various ways to do this beyond the research project. What we're finding is it's really raw right away. And one woman is just finishing up hers, and he has been dead a full year. So, but thank you for that. And I see Pastor Jason, I mean, maybe that's something in terms of grief support, gather people, you know, find some questions that would work and go for it. I'm just going to say a few more things about our next steps, and the first is that we will continue the research as it is, but we're also looking at a way to do this for people who are close to the end of their life, like that man I interviewed Friday, so we can actually get some data that isn't overwhelming for them. But because when you have data, you can write. When you write, people understand. You get opportunities to speak. So it is important to get some data. And then also, I've wondered about, what about people with dementia who may or may not be able to participate themselves, but perhaps their family could do this? Because they're terrified, especially at the very beginning of a diagnosis of losing themselves. And if some of that could be preserved, and maybe those stories could be read to them, I don't know. And then what about healthy seniors? So, our 89-year-old, why not? Why couldn't we do this for everybody? I don't know what a senior is these days, but everybody over 65, 70, 80, I don't know, 90? We don't have enough resources, but what can we do? And now we have another idea. What about survivors? So that is all I have to say to you, but except that what a wonderful welcoming group, and I know that you gather, and you never know. Dr. Morris, do not accuse me of being lost if I show up again.
I would never accuse you of anything, Kate.
Anybody, last questions, comments? Yes.
Just a couple of comments.
One thing, just to say that there's actually been a movement within medicine in the last few years to begin to practice what's called narrative medicine, and for physicians and others in healthcare to actually begin to ask patients questions about kind of really who they are and what's meaningful to them even before they're at the end of life. And I think that's a healthy, good movement. And just to mention, I had a very interesting discussion Wednesday evening this week at Mayo. The medical students are part of a national group, of a chapter here of something called Veritas Forum. It's a group of students that are interested in this kind of thing. They brought a speaker who is a pediatric oncologist at Duke, and he talked about his work with children that are dying, and children and the parents and families as they get to the end where there's no longer anything left medically for them to do. His own journey to get to a place where he could deal with that more. But there's a study he cited of, it's like 400 some parents, and they asked, because one of the big issues there is, do you tell children? Do they know? Do you talk to them? as they approach their end of life or not. And the survey asked patients, did you talk to your children before they passed away? And maybe 40-50% did. And every single one that did was pleased that they had spoken to them. Of the group that hadn't, about half of them said, asked, are you satisfied with that decision? About half said, yes, we really are. We think it was the right thing. We're glad we didn't. But about half of them that hadn't spoken to their children said, I really wish we had. I really wish we had. And of those who kind of hadn't done it but wish they had, that was the biggest predictor of their prolonged grief and struggle and pain after that child's loss. So he just said it's an interesting, and that may help us because we may be able to talk to parents and say, well, here's some things we know about this kind of setting as well. So.
And we haven't done anything like this with our children who are dying. We do have some that come to us on hospice. I wonder what we could do for them. There's somebody up there.
Okay, I can tell a little story about a 5-year-old. It was my nephew, it's my sister's son, and he was diagnosed with leukemia. And his last year of life was not fun for him at all. He would wake up at night and the blood would be streaming out of his ears and out of his nose, and they'd have to get him to the hospital and do a lot of treatments and different things for him. And he went through a lot. And he was the oldest of 3 other children in the family. And one day he said to his mother, just out of the clear blue, he said, how is Jesus going to get me to heaven? That was his concern. And I don't know how his mother answered it, but they were a religious family and always went to church and so on. And my sister has said that was great comfort to her to hear him say that.
It's beautiful, and that children have wisdom, and children often know they're dying even if they aren't told. There are a couple of samples you can take a look at if you'd like. Some have signed permission for us to share them. These are the brochures, and if you would like, I'll just put stuff up here. And I'll be around if you have questions about this, or comments, or hospice, whatever I can tell you. All right, thank you very much.